All right, my name is Sean Fallon, and you're listening to episode 26, The Wire. Welcome to From First to Last. Hello again and welcome again. My name is Sean Fallon. This is From First to Last. You're listening to episode 26. Today, my guest, we've holed ourselves up somewhere in Baltimore. We're on the wire. We've been wiretapped. We've got all the warrants. We've done all the admin and the paperwork, so we're ready to go. So today, my guest is my guest Gravity Beard? Is that what I'm going to call you?
It is.
Excellent. So, Gravity Beard, how are you today?
I'm quite good. Quite well.
Excellent. And what TV show did you choose for us today?
I chose HBO's show The Wire.
The Wire ran for 60 episodes from 2002 to 2008. Wildly considered one of the greatest shows ever made. What is your experience with The Wire?
You know, I don't actually remember who tipped me off to that show, and I don't even remember when I watched it the first time. I think I watched it after it had concluded. So I did have the benefit of getting to watch it from beginning to end at my own pace and not worry about catching up or not. You know, I didn't have to wait. I got to watch the whole thing whenever I wanted. But I mean, the first time I watched it was several years ago, and absolutely loved it. I loved it. You know, it's one of those shows that whenever I've asked other people, "Have you seen The Wire?" They say they'll either say, "Yeah, I saw it, loved it," or they'll say, "Yeah, I watched an episode or two and just couldn't get into it, and so I quit." And I understand. I think you and I will discuss both of those responses. I understand the second response because you do have to sit down and realize that you've got to commit to it, and it's not something you can have on in the background. I mean, you have to sit down and watch it like you're watching, you know, a Lord of the Rings movie where you've really got to pay attention. Well, I think we'll uncover why as we discuss it.
Yeah, no, I was the same. I was in. I think I was teaching overseas, and I went back to England, and a few of my friends were like, "Have you watched The Wire?" I was like, "No, never heard of it." And they were like, because as soon as there was never a point for me when it wasn't the best thing on TV. Like, it was presented to me as, you need to watch this show. It's the greatest thing. You know, it wasn't sort of a sense of like when Breaking Bad. I sort of started that about 3 seasons in, and it was sort of like, oh yeah, this is a really, really good show. And then towards the end, it was like, oh no, this is amazing. Like, this is definitely up there as one of the greatest ones. But The Wire was just like pre-packaged. This show is the greatest thing you're ever going to watch, and then watched it obviously from beginning to end, like just sort of binged it, and would agree. You know, it is the best thing. But like you say, there is that sense of it was like reading a really good novel, like a really dense novel. Like, you had to really read every single line. And the show never held your hand. It was always going to sort of do its own thing, and if you could keep up, you could. But if you couldn't, it wasn't like each episode had like a recap to re-explain who people were. It was like, if you're watching it, you got to listen to every single line of dialogue. You know, like you say, there's no sense of, oh, I can just have it on the background.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. You have to concentrate, and you have to sit down knowing, I'm about to invest all of my energy and focus into this TV show, and not everybody likes to do that. And, you know, this show started, I think, 3 years after The Sopranos did. And so I think that kind of set the stage for all of these other amazing shows that have come out in the last 20 to 25 years, where you've got to sit. It's an investment. You have to sit down, like you said, like a novel or like a really well-developed character movie.
Yeah, that's it. There's like I said, there's no hand-holding. There's no, sort of the one moment of sort of hand-holding actually occurs in this first episode, which we'll get to in a moment. And it's something that towards the end of the episode, there's a flashback. And I was doing some research before this, and David Simon said, like, he never wanted to do flashbacks, never wanted to do anything like that. And the studio insisted upon it in this first episode, because he was very much of the mind of, if people are paying attention, they will get it. How did you feel watching this first episode again?
You know, I enjoyed it just as much as the previous 2 or 3 or 4 times I've seen it. I've really, really enjoyed it. But you know, I watched it a little bit differently because I was watching it in preparation for a conversation about it.
Yeah.
So it caused me to pay, even though I'd seen it. I think that was the third or fourth time I've seen the episode. But it still caused me to focus on it even more, the details in preparation for the conversation about it. But I loved it. I loved every minute, and we'll unpack the things that are great about the show, and I think that'll reveal why I enjoyed it so much.
Yeah, no, same. I hadn't really watched this episode for quite a few years, and watching it, it's an interesting first episode to watch, knowing what comes next. Because I remember the first time I watched it, I think I had to watch about 3 episodes before it really sort of coalesced in my head what was happening. Like the first time I watched it, like I was sort of trying to, because it's not like each character gets introduced as well. Like I did make in my notes, I don't think anyone calls McNulty by his name for about 20 minutes, but other characters do get name. Like when McNulty's talking to the judge, he pretty much says, "Oh yeah, in the courtroom it was D'Angelo Barksdale, Stringer Bell, Weebay, Sting," and he names all of the baddies. But McNulty, I don't think you find out his name until, God, I think maybe Bunk says it at some point, just in passing, like that. So there's not like a whole thing of I can't think of a good example of like another show that does this, but where like a character's introduced and it's very much a sense of like, oh, look at this guy, this is X, Y, and Z. He's, and people get their little intros. Like the show didn't bother with that. It's like, no, here's the character. You'll learn the name as you go. Don't worry about it.
Well, I haven't thought about that. That's not an observation I ever made. It's a good one. But I think it points to the unwillingness of David Simon to handhold, like you pointed out already. And the other thing, now that we've seen The Wire come and go, and we saw The Sopranos come and go, and how those shows started and ended, and we'll talk about the end of this series. But what it looked like to me, and this is what was apparent about The Sopranos and why the conclusion of that series, the final episode, was so controversial, is that this is just the viewer just comes in to something that's already happening, and then at the end of the series, you're just leaving, and they just keep on going, right? So it's just this window of time, and that's how The Sopranos turned out being. Is you don't know what happened to them in the diner. Their life, you could make any number of conclusions, and David Chase isn't going to let you off the hook. He's never going to tell you. He'll go to his grave and never tell you in his own mind what he thought happened. And because I think what happened is nothing. I think they just kept on doing what they do. Their life just continued. And that's what was apparent in The Wire, is that David Simon did the exact same thing. So you come in the middle of McNulty sitting on the stoop next to this guy, and they're at a murder scene, and they're just having a conversation about it. And there's no, hey, this is McNulty, this is the other guy, this is the dead guy, there's no introduction, like you said. And the reason why is because the style that they're employing here is it's just the viewer walking in on these people's lives, and at the end of the series, the viewer is leaves, and then they just and these people who are portrayed as and the stuff that goes on in the series, they're portrayed as real people. It's very, the realism is the backbone of the entire show, just like it is in The Sopranos and some of these other great shows that have come along in the last couple decades. Yeah, no, I mean that's perfect. That's a perfect description of it. Like, it is that sense of, we've just jumped in for 5 years of these people's stories, and then we're just leaving again. It's that's not right. like a lot of the obviously a lot of the shows I've done on this podcast. It's very much a sense of like, you're coming in at the start of a story, and then when the story ends, it's over. Like, I mean, I guess Breaking Bad would be an example of that. Like, you're coming in, you start that the day that, Walter White gets diagnosed with cancer, and then the final episode, you see his empire has collapsed, everything's gone to shit, he's done this, he's done that, and then he dies. And like, okay, well, there's no more to be told. The story's over. Whereas, like you say, that's a perfect example for The Wire. Just like, no, we're just tourists in these people's lives for a bit, and then we leave, and the story just continues, and history repeats itself, and it just goes on, which is the sort of thesis statement, if you will, for The Wire. Like, I think in this first episode, there's a line where Herc and Carver are talking to each other, or Kima and Carver, and he says, you can't call it a war because wars end, and that's just a perfect thing for this show of like, it is unending. Yes, that line stood out to me, whereas before it never did. I mean, I paused and turned. I was watching it with my wife, and I stopped on that line because those two guys. We'll start getting into the characters. Those two guys are basically knuckleheads. Herc more than Carver. But they're just knuckleheads. But Carver, I think demonstrates a little bit more intelligence, but they've got kind of the same recklessness about him. But that line by Carver, I just paused on. I was like, man, that's one of those profound lines of the entire series. It comes in episode 1 by a very unlikely character, but you're right. It's a perfect summary.
Yeah, that's it. And I think actually that is followed very quickly in my notes anyway. I think straight after that is a scene with Bunk and Jimmy, and Bunk says, "This is what you get for giving a fuck when it's not your turn." And again, I thought, okay, well, that's very much almost a through line for the whole show as well. Yes. That idea of you could just turn away and just let this stuff happen and focus on the numbers and just, get the results that get promotions. But it's because they keep trying to do the right thing, it's what gets everyone into trouble.
Yeah, so here's a couple that I want to take a couple steps back and just do a little bit more setup for our conversation.
By all means.
First of all, obviously IMDb is an excellent source for all things movie and TV. But I've gone to a couple of pages for some of these iconic TV shows, and it has this in common. I was really disappointed in it's got this just really brief summary on the main page. It just calls it. And it doesn't summarize the show at all. Like if you just read this one line, I don't know if you'd watch the show at all. It just says Baltimore drug scene seen through the eyes of drug dealers and law enforcement. And I thought, man, what a minimization of the greatest TV show ever that doesn't give you anything about the show.
No, not at all.
And now you can go to the bio and the summary, and it obviously digs into it more deeply. But I was like, man, what a disservice to what probably is the greatest TV show of all time. And speaking of that. There was an article written by the Vulture website, the pop culture website, where they did what they called a derby between 16 of the greatest TV shows of the last 25 years. And I read just the article on the final showdown, and the showdown came between The Wire and The Sopranos. And I think in recent years, people dismiss both of those and they just say it's Breaking Bad, which I think that's a phenomenal show. But and maybe in the conversation, but I still think it comes down to The Wire and The Sopranos. One, The Sopranos, because that was the first one. That was the first one of these types of shows. And The Wire, just because I think it, like this article explained, this article does an excellent job of explaining kind of my position between the two shows, as if you want to make that debate. But I think The Wire just edges out The Sopranos, and I won't get into the explanation. I'll the article can speak for itself. But yeah, it kind of came down to these two shows, The Wire and Sopranos, and The Wire, in my opinion, and it's a very subjective conversation. Is the greatest TV show of all time. And one of the reasons, in my opinion, is because it has such realism. It doesn't feel like there's an ounce of fiction in this show at all. It doesn't ask the viewer for any kind of latitude. I think that's could take over a conversation about a show like Dexter, where it really asks for a lot of latitude and by the viewer. And Breaking Bad was like that. At certain points you're like, God, there's no way. But The Wire, I don't think there's a single moment where you kind of roll your eyes and you're like, that couldn't happen. It never happens. It doesn't happen once. And I think it even happens sometimes in The Sopranos, although that's not a knock against that show. But that is my favorite thing, because I feel like that's the backbone of The Wire, is that it doesn't ask for that latitude. There's not an ounce of fiction in this entire show, the way it's portrayed. Every moment of it, I believe, I keep thinking to myself, this could be exactly how the city of Baltimore functions. And then the other thing I would want to point to is the characters. It does an unbelievable job of developing characters. It had over 700 cast members over the run of the show. I guess I'll let you step in there because I've got some other opinions about characters.
Oh no, I mean, I think you've only got to really think. I've had this conversation a million times where you're like with people who are watching The Wire or who have watched The Wire, and someone will say, "Oh, who's your favorite character?" And you could have because you can have certain shows where you say to someone, "Oh, who's your favorite character?" and people will sort of have 3 or 4. If you said who's your favorite character on Game of Thrones, people are going to say Tyrion or Tyrion or Jon Snow or Khaleesi or one other,
Right.
Whereas this, I've had a whole conversation where someone said, "Who's your favorite character?" and every single person has said a different name, and it's been like someone's gone, "Oh, Omar," and someone's gone, "Bunk, Poot, McNulty, da 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 da." And
Right.
you can kind of like within the space of a conversation change your opinion 10 times. You can be like, oh, it's McNulty. Oh wait, no, because then Kima's with. Oh no, but then this, and just like because there was never a character. Like there were annoying characters, but they weren't annoying without meaning, if that makes any sense. Like Ziggy Sopotka in season 2, he's an intensely annoying character, but that was his whole thing. Like that all came to pay off at the end, like how annoying he was, if that makes any sense. There's no duff characters. There's no characters that don't work, that don't feel real. You know what I mean? Like they don't feel like they fit.
Yeah. So here's the thing about characters in The Wire, is to what you're saying. They really, if you can probably put all the characters in the show into two buckets. You either root for them or you root against them.
Yeah.
Right. There's not any bad characters. There's just, do you root for them or root against them? There's no unnecessary characters. They all seem to be irrelevant. And so yeah, I can probably tell you who my favorite character is. My favorite character is Omar Little.
Okay.
I'm not even sure if I could explain why. He's just kind of a badass, and he's the kind of guy that could walk right down the middle of a street in the middle of a gunfight and never gets hit by a bullet.
Yeah.
I just liked him. I liked everything about him. Plus, he had this weird, kind of confusing sense of justice about him, in a way. But the thing about it is that was the other thing that I was reminded of as I watched the first episode, is every character that came onto the screen for the first time, I was like, I like that guy. I like that guy. I like that guy. And I didn't root for all of them, like Carcetti, you can't root for that guy. But he succeeds. The show ends, and we'll talk about the last episode, but the show ends is implying that he gets the governorship of, for the state of Maryland. And I rooted against him every step of the way, although I think you can kind of see where it's going. And like you said, Ziggy, I rooted against that guy every second. In fact, that's my least favorite season of The Wire, is season 2. I think it delivers just like the other seasons. I just didn't like that group of characters. I didn't feel like I wanted to root for them. So when the entire season's about a group of characters that you don't want to root for, you don't enjoy it as much. But that's the thing is whether they were part of the drug dealers or part of the cops or part of the government or whatever, you're like, I like all of these characters for different reasons. And even some of the fringe characters like Prop Joe and all the kids that just play small parts and just so many. Every character is just amazing. That's what overwhelms me about the greatness of the show is that I can't think of another. Even when I think about those other amazing shows, there's characters I just can't deal with. Like 6 Feet Under, which I really, really enjoyed that show. Mm-hmm. I disliked the majority of the characters. They were all kind of annoying. I thought that was a weird phenomenon about that show. Like I've watched that entire show twice, and I enjoyed it both times because we won't talk about 6 Feet Under in depth. But that was also an amazing show and amazingly creative and had amazing acting and just the unexpected all the time. But the characters, the majority of the characters were so damned annoying, and it was amazing to me that I got through the series twice, knowing that I didn't like really any. I didn't like any of the characters. So this show is the opposite. No matter who they are or what they do on the show or where they come from or how they come and go or what piece they are of the puzzle, you like all of them. It's just weird. Even the judges, just these weird peripheral characters, you like all of them. Like the character that Lance Reddick plays. He's that's an amazing character.
And yeah, it's interesting as well. Like you say, like even characters who you dislike, you don't mind watching them. So like a character who I intensely disliked was Major Rawls. He's in this first episode and he's in this last episode, and he hates McNulty and all that. But
right,
it wasn't a thing of like when he would come on screen, I'd be like, oh crap, let's get to the next scene. You even like enjoy disliking the characters you enjoy disliking the characters who you don't root for. Like that was how good it was. It was even like and the sense of realism had that thing where even though Rawls was a piece of shit, he would still have quite human moments because no one is a piece of shit all the time. In the real world,
right.
People do. Like I think it's an episode in the first season where Greggs gets shot, and McNulty's sort of blaming himself, and Rawls is the one who gives him the pep talk, but it's a horrible pep talk. He's really insulting.
Very
but
poorly
it is
executed.
But it is what McNulty needs at that moment. So it is that sense of, okay, yeah, this guy is a piece of shit, but he's also their boss, and he also needs his detectives to do their work. So he does do the sort of fatherly pep talk. He's just a horrible human being, which again is an incredible.
Let me talk about Rawls for a second, and that'll bring a theme into the conversation. And so here's a couple themes of the show. Now, one thing that's interesting, because the show does have an ongoing plot through the entire series. It is that type of a show, but also each season kind of is defined, even though it doesn't. Yeah. And more than you would expect, given all the things we've talked about regarding the series. Each season except for I think it's after season 3, maybe, kind of wraps up kind of in a tidy way. And then the next season kind of starts with a fresh whatever. But, so season 1 is the drug trades and the projects, and season 2 is the docs, and season 3 is, I think that's when they get started with the election and some other things.
Yeah,
and
the politics season, yeah.
Yeah, and then season 4 gets into the schools pretty heavily, and then season 5 is the newspaper. So there are the kind of those themes. But here's something that I realized, and that this is why I like your show so much. A really, really creative way to approach a podcast about television shows is to watch the first episode and the last episode and then discuss it from that perspective. I think that's really cool and creative. So
thank you.
Just want to give you that compliment. Because it's like movie podcasts. There's hundreds of them out there, but to come up with a fresh way to approach it is hard to do, and I think you've done that.
Yeah.
But what it caused me to do by watching the first episode and the last episode alone, having not watched the rest of the series in quite some time, is that even though this show has a giant ensemble cast, okay, like I said, there's 700 cast members, and there's probably 100 that are central, to the show, and that's a lot of characters to keep up with and to develop and to write for. But what I didn't realize until I watched it this way was that this show is actually about Jimmy McNulty. He's central in the entire series. There's a lot of things that happen that come and go. There's a lot of people that die in the show. There's themes, like we just said, in each season that they move on from, that they leave behind. There's other characters that disappear and don't come back until the end. Jimmy McNulty is there the entire time. And so I could be wrong. I'd love to ask that question to David Simon, but this seems to be a show about about that character, about Jimmy McNulty.
No, that's interesting, because I do agree with that. But the other thing that I noticed doing first to last, the character that I thought had the most from first to last, like the most sort of of an arc, was Bubbles.
Oh yeah, sure.
Bubbles in the first episode is disturbing, and he's got the fake money, and he's with the other dude, and it's just gross. And then that final episode, you see him where he's gone all the way and he's clean and he's living in his sister's basement and he's selling the newspaper, and he gets redeemed at the end.
Sure.
I think that's a bit of almost like a stealth arc that's ran all the way through the show, of Bubbles and his story just constantly going on in the background.
Yeah, that's a great observation.
But yeah, I think definitely, if it was Bubbles and McNulty as the main characters, definitely. I think that they represent, because there's no drug dealer character that makes it from the first to the last, because obviously most of those characters are dead or in jail.
But you wouldn't expect a drug character to make it from the first to last, right? That's an accurate portrayal of that lifestyle. That's it. Right? Yeah, so the shocking scene where and these are a bit fringe characters, so I don't remember them, but they're all in the parking lot figuring out how what this new thing's going to look like now that and the one guy shoots the other guy in the head, and they're all like, holy crap, what did you just do? Why did you do that? So nobody makes it. Even characters you think are going to make it don't make it, in the drug world. But going back to kind of my thesis of it being about Jimmy, which I could be wrong. I'm fine with that. I'm not going to die on that sword.
You're spot on there.
But what I think is great about Jimmy, some things are obvious. Like, he clearly establishes himself as a character that is going to do things his own way, even though he is operating inside of a giant institution, right? Yeah. So everybody around him is kind of going along with it, playing their company roles, except for Jimmy. And so the other thing about him is that there's so many people that are frustrated or just flat out hate him. You know, he has so many people that hate him. And you brought up Rawls. That's what reminded me of it. And you had mentioned you didn't care for that character. I actually love that character because because his hate for Jimmy is so intense. And it's so intense, and that intensity is revealed in that one season where he walks in there and he's basically flipping him the bird with both fingers. Then he goes into this long explanation as to why he's flipping him off with both fingers, and he explains what he's going to do with one finger and then the other finger. And it's just it's just awesome, man. It's this vitriol, it's this hate for him, you know, and it's intense, and I just love it. Like he can't help himself. He just hates Jimmy so much, and there's other characters. But the other thing is, you could also tell, and this is revealed, you know, in the last episode where he ends up, you know, with the I don't know what they called it, an Irish funeral or whatever, where he's laying on the pool table. You know, it's in spite of how frustrating Jimmy is and how there are a lot of people that seem to hate him, they also really love him. You know, and so and that seems really human. You know, is that despite all the things that he does throughout the series to kind of make things hard on himself and everyone else, and sometimes the consequences for his actions or decisions are really severe. You know, they respect him for being a great detective. You know? And he's kind of likable in this weird kind of flawed way, but he's incredible at his job. And anybody that's that great at their job, all the other characters on that show seem to really respect them, you know, regardless of which group of characters they're part of.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Yeah, like that's a perfect summation of McNulty. And yeah, that final scene or final episode where he's like in the we're having like the Irish wake in the pub, and yeah, you say again, very very real. Like, very real in the sense of, like, yeah, he is an incredibly frustrating character. But, yeah, if you're in those circles, if you're good at what you do, then you just sort of, people will forgive you for being a drunk, womanizing fuck-up. But the other thing as well, which is interesting, like, which I noticed in that first episode, like, the reason that Rawls is so angry with McNulty is that McNulty's trying to do the job. You know, he's trying to do the right thing because he wants to stop all these drug dealers, which means that the bosses now have to do their jobs. Like, he hasn't technically done anything. I think Jimmy's had good intentions. He's just, because he's broken the chain of command, that's caused all the problems. But I think that was another sort of theme of this show, was people being punished for trying to do the right thing. Like, I think that sort of culminates in the finale when you do have, like, that final montage, and all the people who... It feels as though all the people who you sort of, like, who should have had some sort of downfall are all the ones getting promoted. And all the people who have sort of had to bend the rules to try and do the right thing are all sort of having to leave the police force. Like, I think that it's massively cynical, like, but it feels true. It feels real. Well,
and I was going to say regarding, so Jimmy's not going to do what the institution wants him to do. You know, he's not going to play by the rules, and he would justify it as, it's because I want to do my job well. And there's a scene in episode 1 where, so in episode 1, they're all sitting around, they're talking about how they're going to address these 10 murders that are basically because of Jimmy, and so, what's Lance Reddick's Lieutenant
Daniels?
Yes, thank you. So Lieutenant Daniels is frustrated because, you know, so the state prosecutor's standing there because they're all outlining their plan, and so Lieutenant Daniels gives the plan, and then Jimmy gets frustrated and says, "Well, then we might as well not do it," and then Daniels gets pissed, and then eventually just says, "This is what we're going to do. What I said we're going to do," and then he explains it again, and then again, this is what's great about watching first and last, is that at the last, Daniels basically resigns very shortly after getting the commissioner job because he wants to do it right, and the institution wants him to do what the institution wants. That's right? Like they want him to cook the numbers. He wants to give real numbers, and that's the reason he resigns, because he's not willing to play ball. That's the exact same thing that he got frustrated with Jimmy about in episode 1. right?
That's good. I didn't notice that. That's genius.
So he ends his career. He ends his career going from probably patrol officer all the way to commissioner, where he holds that position for what seems like weeks or whatever.
Yeah.
This Lieutenant Daniels, and he quits because of something he got frustrated with Jimmy about in literally the first episode of the series. And I would not have noticed that. I would not have put those two things together had I not watched it this way. So that's what's so brilliant about that approach.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, I had in my notes here about a note about McNulty, like talking about character and talking about the character of McNulty. So there's a scene where he's out drinking with Bunk, and then he goes and has a piss on the train tracks as the train's coming towards him. And I just put that is just a metaphor for that entire character. Like, that is just McNulty.
Absolutely.
100% pissing on the tracks while the train comes towards him. That seems to be how he lives his entire life all the way through the show. That
is a great observation and very thematic. Yes, and very metaphoric. Absolutely, I would completely agree.
Yeah, no, and I think McNulty is just a great character and a great sort of lightning rod for viewers to sort of focus on, because he's a good guy with bad habits. He's not like a full Tony Soprano or Walter White anti-hero. He's just like, he's actually sort of a dirtier version of like Don Draper in Mad Men. He's very good at his job, but he has bad extracurricular activities. He's a womanizer and he's a big drinker. But it's just that McNulty isn't, as smooth as Don Draper. He's, drinking shots in the bar and driving drunk and all that, and a bit of a mess, but he is still a very, very good detective who wants to do the right thing, but needs to just like duke the system to make it happen, which again is very much throughout the whole show. It is sort of actually, sorry, just realized there, like you're saying about Daniels going from being like part of the system to being more like Jimmy by the end. That does happen to a few characters throughout. Like, you definitely see, I feel like Lester starts off being quite by the book and then ends up becoming more like McNulty. And Greg's as well. Like, Greg's becomes almost the female McNulty as the show goes on. Like, he is one of those characters that just rubs off on people.
Yeah, that's a good observation, because what did you say? What was his name that you just mentioned?
Lester Freeman.
Lester Freeman. Not only does he become more like McNulty, but he becomes basically his partner in what they're doing in the end. So, that's a great observation.
Just one of those odd characters. It's just very, very good. Yeah, I think really so I guess a character we didn't really mention that first episode, just sort of like the last bit, is like when he appeared on screen, like D'Angelo Barksdale. I always thought that was a fantastic character. Like, I know he doesn't last very long, but I thought that was just a great character, like someone who is sort of deep in the drug trade, but trapped by family and obligation and loyalty. Like, again, just to sort of go back to what you're saying at the start, it is that sort of, there's such a sense of realism and such a human approach to everything. Like, because D'Angelo was such a tragic figure and just a fantastic character, and again, just like well acted, well written, and just felt as though you were watching a real person do real things, like it was a documentary. That was I
think this show could have been a series like it was, or it could have been a documentary, right? It could have gone either way.
Yeah, that's it. Like, I do have David Simon's Homicide book, which is I think it's like the first couple of pages of that is literally Jay Landsman, who's Jay Landsman is a real detective in Baltimore, or he was, and he's a character in this show, but also the actual detective plays a different character, if that makes any sense. So you've got Sergeant Landsman is the big chub, the big fat dude.
Okay, but
you've also got, like, there's a skinny white dude, skinny white-haired dude with a mustache, who is actually the real Jay Landsman, who plays another character. It's very odd.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. See, that's if I would have had a bunch of time to do research for our time together, that I wanted to dig very deeply into David Simon, because I never saw the show that he did before, which I think for NBC, Homicide: Life on the Streets,
No,
which,
same.
which I heard was somewhat similar, if not even kind of a practice run, although it went for a few seasons. But that show ended in 1999, and he started this show launched in 2002. So it's almost as if he started on The Wire shortly after the show concluded. And that would be almost my first question for David Simon is why did you basically start another project that was extremely similar right as you finished the other one? What was, because normally a creator like that is going to create something and kind of scratch that itch and then move on to the next thing. But he basically did another 6 years or something on a very similar project.
Yeah, and I mean for me as well, like I'm not a big fan of cop shows, so Homicide: Life on the Streets didn't appeal to me at all. But then now, obviously having watched The Wire, it is tempting to go back. But from what I've heard, it's like it's good, but it's not, because it's more of like a case of the week type show that just had some incredible episodes.
Okay.
But yeah, it's odd because usually you will see, like, I mean, to use 6 Feet Under as the example, like Alan Ball did 6 Feet Under and then he did True Blood. They're very different.
Right.
Sort of like
not even close.
Yeah, you feel like, okay, well, I've done all I can do in this world. I mean, the guy who did Mad Men, the show he was doing before was Sopranos. So Sopranos and Mad Men, there are similarities, but they're different worlds. You're not living in that same constant thing again.
Yes.
So yeah, that's odd for David Simon to sort of go cop show.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think fans of television were richly blessed when HBO, who I think maybe the first one, started doing original series, with Sopranos, because that ushered in the era that we're kind of still in of these amazing shows. And that's where the great divide was established between the quality of a cable show and the quality of a network show, right? Yeah. And so maybe, again, this is all speculating. I've never had an interview with David Simon, of course, but perhaps he did that show, Life on the Street, but there was really no platform to do it the way he wanted to do it, and he thought, well, now if HBO is doing these original series and they kind of, it's hands off and they can let the creator develop what they want, and there's far fewer restrictions and rules, I can finally do this project the way I want to, and maybe that's the reason.
Yeah, that's it.
Maybe Homicide: Life on the Streets was very unsatisfying. It didn't actually scratch the itch like we thought it did.
Yeah, that would make sense. It was sort of like, I want to do this show, but I don't want to have to do procedural, case of the week, guest stars, any of that crap. And HBO have gone, go for it, fill your boots. You can do each season like a separate story, and we'll go from there. And
exactly.
Yeah. So the final episode of this, what was your take on that when you first watched it?
Okay, so the first episode, that was the third or fourth time I'd seen it, and I've been up through the third or three and a half seasons or so, maybe like 3 or 4 times as well. I've only watched season 5 once, and so to step into it and just watch that one episode in preparation for this conversation, I found it very confusing because I couldn't remember what the story threads were. The episode kind of opens up and they're in the mayor's office and they're all really, really concerned about whatever's going on, but you don't have any context for it, having not watched the episodes leading up to it. And so initially I was confused, and I even now, maybe you can fill me in. I don't remember what the thing was with McNulty and in the homeless and the ribbons on the wrist, and I don't remember what he was trying to accomplish there. Those were my first thoughts.
If I recall correctly, it was Carcetti had come in and he'd said they were going to give more manpower and money to the police, and then I think when the season starts, he's been mayor for like a year and nothing's happened. So McNulty, it's a bit wild, but I think he creates a fake serial killer. Oh yeah, they find a dead body and he wraps a red ribbon around its wrist, and he does that a few times, establishes this fake serial killer, and then causes a citywide panic. So the mayor's just throwing money and manpower at the police, and then he siphons those resources off to go after Marlowe.
Okay.
But like you say, a lot of the stuff in the final episode when they were talking about like when Ronnie, the state's attorney, is talking about it, I didn't really remember any of that, like how she was tied into it, and I didn't remember the clock code, illegal wiretap stuff, like the fine details eluded me. Like I couldn't.
Right. Me too. Yeah. But you know it was a longer episode. I can't remember if it was 1.5 or 2 hours. So
it was 1.5.
Yeah, so it was a 1.5 hours. It extended series preview, which is understandable.
Mm-hmm.
But I liked it. I liked it. It was a busy episode with a heavy narrative, and then what's funny though is that they unfolded the story at a fairly slow pace throughout most of the episode, and then all of a sudden it felt like they wrapped it up really quickly. Like almost they'd thought through, an hour and 26 minutes of the episode, and then I thought, crap, we got to wrap this up somehow, and they were very rushed in the last 4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah, because you do have that sort of thing of like, oh my god, there's a copycat serial killer. Now we've got to find it, and then McNulty goes, I know who it is. Just straight away, done. Okay, that plot's
right. And then before you know it, they're running a montage, and the show's over.
It's interesting because I had a friend on Facebook who was watching The Wire, and he did this big rant about how much he hated the final episode, and his argument was like, oh well, there was just no ending. Like, well, yeah, like obviously, as me and you said at the start of this podcast, like you can't have The Wire end with like McNulty ends the drug trade in Baltimore. You know what I mean? It can't. The whole 59 episodes before this have essentially said to you, this story will not end. There's no winning here. All you can do is just try and get your small victories, which has been the thesis of the entire show. But yeah,
like you said, Carver set you up for that in episode 1 of the series.
Yeah,
which I never noticed before. So here's the thing on that is there's certain things just in pop culture amongst fans that are just seem to be popular to do. One of them is if you go see a great movie and then there's a sequel, you have to hate the sequel. If there's a great book that's written and then there's a movie that comes out about the book, everyone has to say that the book is better. If you watch an epic television series like this or The Sopranos or whatever, or Seinfeld or whatever, you have to say that the finale is terrible, right? You can't respect the creator and just say, hey, you know what? They spent a decade working on this project. They probably spent a few years before that. They poured their entire lives into it. We got to see a manifestation of their talent like they've probably never demonstrated before. And so this is how they decided how they wanted to wrap up, that period, that season of their life, this project. And we're just going to crap all over it. Like we know better, like they owe us something, whereas what I think we need to recognize is, hey man, this is their creation and they invited us into it. And we've talked about it with all of our friends, episode after episode, about how much we loved it. And it's almost like it's this childlike bitterness that, hey, this thing that I love is over, and I'm going to pout about it by ripping on the finale. And I don't know, maybe that's not the reason. I'm not saying that there's not some bad finales out there, because I've said it too. But man, let's just think about how the fact that this is the way the creator wanted to wrap it up, and just respectful response to that, to that one Facebook comment. Yes, this is a show where you get to peek into these people's lives, and then you step out, just like The Sopranos, and that is true to the nature of the show. That is this type of show, and again, like I said, my favorite thing about the show is that it doesn't seem to have an ounce of fiction, and it would be pure fiction to tie up episodes or even seasons or especially the series, but with this little bow where everything kind of comes to this neat conclusion. That's not how a show like this works.
Yeah, no, very much so. I mean, it is that sort of thing of like the ending is quite frustrating, but it's frustrating because I remember being really frustrated when I first saw it because the show was ending. Because I was like, oh shit, well, once this is over, tomorrow I won't get to watch another episode and all that. But it's very frustrating because like that final montage, Valchek, the guy who causes all the problems in season 2, is now commissioner, so that's a mess. Rawls has like become superintendent or whatever, and Carcetti's governor. It's like, oh, these assholes are just like failing upwards. And then you've got like Daniels has now become a lawyer, and McNulty's out, and Freeman's retired, and so on and so on. You're like, it's just frustrating because these characters, like Carcetti, should have been brought down at some point, but it's like no, because in the real world, that doesn't happen. People make shady backroom deals to keep their careers intact, and
Right.
people just like the idea of the series ending with like the newspaper in 2008 bringing down all these government figures for this scandal just wouldn't make sorry, yeah, and that as well, like the guy who tells all the lies in the paper, the final scene of him is him winning an award. You're like, well, yeah, of course.
That's right.
Because he got the
Right.
circulation for the paper.
That's how real life works. That's how it
Yeah.
happens in the real world, right? Look around, right?
Yeah.
And so this show is not fiction. It's not attempting to be fiction, and so it's not going to wrap it up that way. So I 100% agree with you. I think this. I will say this again because I didn't have any context, and I just couldn't remember because I didn't see the preceding episodes. But I don't understand why McNulty had that one homeless guy in his car. Like I was very confused.
Yeah.
Do you remember what the reason was? What was he doing?
Sort of half remember it. It's. I think they're trying to imply that the murderer's kidnapping people, maybe. Like I think that's where the idea of like the grey van comes into it. So it's like,
Yeah.
it caused more of a panic. It's like the idea that like this van's going around like stealing homeless people. So they I don't know. I don't 100% remember, but it's something to like stash some dude so they can pretend that he's been kidnapped or something. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't remember the details on that one.
Yeah. So I found that confusing, but I found that the way that they wrapped up the series to be very appropriate. I think is the best way that I would say it. And you know, for the people that like bows on top of boxes for their shows at the end, they gave you some of that. They let you know that certain characters were going to be just fine despite some things and whatever. And so, I mean, they gave you some of that, but too much of that, and it would have been faithful to the show for 5 seasons.
Yeah, no, that's it. I mean, you because even like within the show, because like you say, you did have that thing of like the 5 seasons all sort of had. So they had their they had the long running stories for a bunch of characters went on all 5 years, but there were a few sort of like self-contained stories that had like beginnings, middles, and ends just within each season. So you do get a sense of that. Like you've had endings, and I mean, the show has prepared you for that thing where you're not going to get constant happy endings. So like I see season 4 ends with a lot of the kids you've been following at the school are in different kinds of messes. Like that one kid is in like a boys' home and everyone's calling him a snitch. Michael has like joined up with Marlowe's crew and so on, and like the show having these sort of open-ended, quite sad endings is not a new thing. The show hasn't had like each episode end with a nice bow wrapped around it and then at the end giving you something a bit ambiguous. That's been the show from minute one.
Yeah. I don't feel like the series finale episode took this sharp left turn that should have been shocking to viewers.
Yeah, that's it.
I feel like you got what you should have. It shouldn't have been surprising to you how it ended.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it is interesting. Like one of the reasons I enjoy this show so much is I'm a big fan of like procedural movies, like Spotlight, All the President's Men, Zodiac. Like when you have like how the ideas come and the work you need to put into it and the admin, and then you get like the big result at the end. And I think that this show just took that to its like complete extreme, because so many scenes, like in this final episode, that scene with where the lawyer Ronnie is talking to the like Marlowe's lawyer, and they have their little back and forth. That got to a point where like I could follow it, but a lot of it was jargon and stuff like that, and I sort of kept losing the thread of it. And he's sort of like, fine, well, Marlowe can walk on conspiracy, but we'll put the trial in a stet docket and this and that's. Like, okay, I sort of get what you're saying, like, but okay, cool. And I think the show always did that was so enjoyable in the sense of you saw all the pieces get put together and then some manner of result at the end. But it wasn't always a perfect result. It wasn't always, at the end they got every drug dealer, or it wasn't at the end they solved the school crisis in America or stuff like that.
Well, that's the thing. Like you said at the beginning of our conversation, they're not going to hold your hand. Not from minute one or not from the last minute. You're going to get what you get, and other things you're not going to completely understand, and you're going to get some context but they're just living their lives, and we get to watch. And when you take that approach to a TV show, you're going to get a mix of those things.
Yeah, no, just great. And every character sort of, had quite stretchy morals, and that sort of final, because I think that final episode sort of culminates in everyone sort of, there's a line on the floor of where everyone stands in terms of like this whole fuck up with the serial killer. And like you say, Daniels is a perfect example of like someone who could completely benefit from just keeping his mouth shut, towing the line, and just doing the work. But it's just gone on too long for him. And he can't do the numbers anymore. Whereas like on the other side, you have like Rawls, who's like, yeah, cool, happy days. I'll keep my mouth shut and just keep rising up the ladder.
That's right.
You do have those and then there's characters who are sort of on the line, dancing in the middle. Like McNulty sort of wants everything to come out in the open, but knows it's going to hurt everyone else and it's going to hurt the Marlowe case. So he's like, I don't know, and it has to like sort of go one way or the other. Yeah, no, just fantastic.
Yeah, I guess I don't want to make too strong of a statement. Jimmy ultimately doesn't get what he wants, right? He wants to, but his goals are like riding on a treadmill. There's always going to be other drug dealers or other big cases, and the city's never going to approach going after those guys in a way that's satisfying to him. So he's never going to get what he wants, and so there's this underlying frustration for him, which is really unfortunate until finally he's no longer police. But the one character, this is completely out of context of everything we just talked about, but the one character I meant to bring up earlier was Jay, the sergeant.
Yeah.
Man, in a similar way that I like Rawls, I loved every scene that Jay was in. Yeah. And even when he was angry, he was funny about it. He had a sarcasm, just a biting wit and sarcasm about his, always had a grin on his face, no matter how pissed he was. And so he's on my list of favorite characters. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, and there's actually a good point you bring up there. This show, incredibly gritty, incredibly real, also incredibly funny. There was a lot of times when, because again, in the real world, sometimes people are just funny all the time. People say funny things and make funny observations. Like characters like Jay and Bunk are just hilarious characters. Just constantly, and like you say, the two you used a great term. The two knuckleheads were very funny characters.
Extremely funny. Yeah. That's an excellent point. I feel like the humor of this show is vastly underrated. I think nobody talks about how it's even in the most serious moments, or even in the light moments. Like it at times it has some really funny moments, and I never thought about that, but it certainly does. I think that's kind of in a subtle way that I never even thought about. I think that's another reason why I like it so much.
Yeah. It was never sort of like, because I think if you look at all 5 seasons, I think, like you say, I think the second season is probably the most grim, where that one with the stevedores, and it's sort of unrelenting. It's a very slow season, and it's quite violent, and it is quite a bit of a slog. Whereas season 3, which is my favorite, where they make Amsterdam, or Hamsterdam, sorry, and they have
Absolutely.
A place, and that's it. I mean, that season for me, I think is just genius, and that had a lot of funny stuff in it, with
tons. Yep.
Yeah, Bunny Colvin trying to keep all the drug dealers in one place. Just very funny stuff. But again, turned out to be very, obviously the idea has worked, but eventually the press get wind of it and the whole thing falls apart, and then Bunny gets kicked out with no pension. You're like, okay, well, reality kicks its way in all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess if I was going to tell someone that to watch The Wire, I would still tell them to watch all of the seasons. I don't know that I would. I was sitting here as you were explaining that I was trying to decide, would I tell someone just skip season 2 and just go from season 1 to season 3, but I just don't remember some of the nuances of season 2 that you might miss something that's important. I don't remember. So I guess I would tell someone to watch season 2, but if I was going to go back and watch it again, which I think would be the third time maybe, I might watch season 1 and then skip to season 3 and watch 3, 4, and 5. But
yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of people, again, like the thing I was saying earlier about the favorite characters, I think this show as well is one of those shows where people have everyone seems to have a different favorite season. Like, a lot of people I know really like season 4 with the school. I'm a big fan of season 3. I know people who, the idea of you saying that they need to skip season 2 would be blasphemy. Like, that's their favorite season. And
have you talked to somebody that said that that's their favorite season?
Yeah, and it's
interesting.
It's an interesting one though, because I remember watching it, and it's so slow because it takes them so long to get started in the investigation, and it's such an impediment. Because again, quite realistically, like in the first season when they're sort of chasing after drug dealers, as homicide and narcotics cops, they know how to do that. Whereas like the second season where they've got to like get the investigation going and then like break into the world of like stevedores, so that takes more time, and then the Russians get involved, and it takes. I don't think that season ever really sort of puts the foot down. Like, I don't think it ever puts the gas on. I think it is just constantly just like a very, very slow meditative season, and then just ends.
I think you're right. Plus, I don't like the characters.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because like the Sobotkas are rubbish characters, and there's no one who really, because no one really continues after that as well. I think that's the weird thing. Like with other seasons, like obviously season 3 introduces Carcetti, who becomes a major character all the way. In the same way, the school kids introduced in 4, a lot of them continue as you go along, but season 2 is a lot more isolated. It's a lot more closed off, and not many of those characters recur again. It's sort of like, right, that's locked, and it's just sort of locked and sealed away. And then season 3 comes in, which is faster, a bit lighter, and just more enjoyable.
Yeah, I guess I would say this. That's the standout about season 2, is that they're still great characters. They're exactly who you would think they would be. They're well written and well developed. They're just not likable. There's no characters in that season that you want to root for. They're just not. They're kind of frustrating and irritating. The one thing that I'm thinking, one nuance that you would miss, I don't know if it would cause any confusion, but you get introduced to the Greek who it turns out is shown again in the last episode that he ends up being the connect. He's the connect to all the drugs in Baltimore.
Yeah.
So you would miss that small piece. Especially when they show him in season 5 as part of, I guess, just part of the montage. But maybe you wouldn't miss anything. But those are the characters. Those are the important characters to the overall theme of the series that you'd miss out on is the Greek and his sidekick and the fact that that's the connect for all the drugs in Baltimore.
Yeah, that's it. But yeah,
but other than that, I don't know. I could take or leave season 2.
Yeah, it's not something I would rush to put myself through again. I think it was something that was quite. I did find myself getting quite frustrated with it.
Yeah.
And also as well, this is just a completely nothing point. I just remember in season 2 there was a scene where they were all sat in the bar at like 7 a.m, all the stevedores, and then someone comes in with like a thing of eggs, and they all just crack eggs into their beer and drink it, and that just turned my stomach. And I think about that still. Yeah, I think they have like they crack it into the beer and they drink the whole beer and then they drink a shot. I'm like, oh no, that's just horrible. That's too much.
It's not good for the human body.
No, that's why
I don't recommend that to anyone, friends or enemies.
No. So, I guess the interesting thing as well with this last episode, like to sort of come right to the end of it, is that like final sort of like a wrap-up montage, and it does sort of give you an idea, because the season did do that up until that last episode. There was a few characters who hadn't been in it for a while who would get revisited. So I think like you see like I think Poot, one of the corner boys, you see him and he works at Foot Locker. He's gone off the streets and he's doing something. And then you see like you see Bunny Colvin has adopted that other kid whose name I've forgotten, and you see different characters and all that throughout the season. And then that final montage, it's sort of like all the major characters, but then that interesting thing of like how each character has sort of moved into another character's place. So Michael's become Omar, Dookie's become Bubbles, Snyder's become, McNulty and all that. And I mean, it lacks some of the subtlety that the show has always had, but it is that sort of thing of like, it's very true to the show in the sense of like, this whole story has not ended and maybe will never end. Just new people will take over the roles of the old people, and there's a new mayor, and that mayor might be corrupt as shit, and and it's just sort of like, it's frustrating. Like I say, like you're watching it and you're just like, oh god, it would be against the show's philosophy to sort of have like a nice, easy ending. But you, as a viewer, you are sort of like, oh, I would just like this just to end with like, we've stopped the drug trade, and corruption's over.
Well, my message to anybody who genuinely thinks that that's how the show should have been ended, I would say, hey, there's 3 major networks that you can go watch shows just like that. They're CBS, ABC, NBC, and possibly Fox. So that can be your TV playground if that's what you need, because it's not going to happen here, and it's not going to happen on any TV show that's worth its salt.
That's it, exactly. I mean,
it's not going to happen.
Well, the thing with The Wire is like, I mean, because I think I said this before, like I'm not a big fan of cop shows, and then watch The Wire, and The Wire has ruined cop shows for me now, because like
right
if I watch like an episode of CSI or something, I'm like, nah, where are they getting the funding? Where like
like that's awful. This is a terrible TV show.
Yeah, and even
but it's also put on. It's also put on by one of the most successful people in entertainment, Jerry Bruckheimer, who seems to be has the Midas touch. So
that's
good for him, because he's made $1 billion.
Incredible. Well, me and a bunch of my friends, like I think we were all Wire fans, and we were watching Traffic, like Steven Soderbergh's Traffic, and at the end of that,
tremendous but a disturbing film.
Yeah, that's it. And at the end of that, like Don Cheadle goes into the bad guy's house, and he's all drunk and he's belligerent, and the bad guy's men beat him up. And when he falls on the floor, he sticks like a bug under the table, and then he gets dragged out and he's thrown to the street. And as Don Cheadle walks away, he's got a big smile on his face. And then the film ends after that. And we were watching it. My friend was like, "That's an illegal wiretap." So anything they get, and just straight away it was all State's attorney's going to turn that over. It's not going to be admissible in court. That's going to unravel, and that's the legacy the Wire's given us. It's like, no, these things don't actually work in the real world. You can't.
Like, thanks a lot, David Simon.
Yeah, it's like, oh great, now I can't just enjoy a film.
Well, I hate to do this, but I've gotten a text warning that my tribe is heading back to the barn.
Okay, cool. Well, let's wrap it up. So, where can people find you online?
I'm on Twitter at The Gravity Beard. I have a Facebook page under Gravity Beard. You can find the Gravity Beard podcast on iTunes, I think Google Play maybe, and other places where you find podcasts, but mostly on iTunes. The show is hosted on Podbean, so you can download the Podbean episode. I've got if you listen to the show and you've got any comments or need to reach out to us, we do have an email address. It's contactthebeard@gmail.com. Gravity Beard is a variety show, so you never know what you're going to get. We've done some great interviews and some other fun things that are sports related and other pop culture related things. One of the things that are coming up on the show that we're really excited about is I did an interview with Ellen Latson, who is a former child actor who debuted in acting by playing Michael Douglas's daughter in Fatal Attraction in the 1987 film. And then people mostly know her as Ruby Sue, Randy Quaid's daughter in Christmas Vacation. So I did a lengthy interview with her about some of her acting experiences, but also just the struggle of transitioning from being a child actor to figuring out where you fit into real life, into a normal life. And it's a very personal and very deep interview, and that's going to be coming out here in probably about 3 weeks.
Fantastic, man. That sounds awesome. I love Christmas Vacation, so I will. I'll definitely check that out. Awesome.
Yeah, looking forward to it. And a bunch of other stuff. And then we're actually launching a new project called Bigger and Better, which I'll if people listen to the show, then I'll unpack what that means. But kind of almost a whole new podcast that we're going to launch here in the next probably come out in September. We're going to develop it over the next few months.
Fantastic, man. Well, as for me, you can find me on Twitter at first to last pod, and email me directly at fromfirstlastpodcast@gmail.com. Much like Gravity Beard, please feel free to just send me an email or send me a message and say, I want to do a certain show, and if the show's available, we can do it, and I'll set up the time and we can make it happen. So, thank you for coming on the show.
You know, Sean, as you can tell from our conversation, I absolutely love the TV show The Wire. I really do think, at least in the non-comedy category, it's the best TV show of all time. Mm-hmm. And so I really, really appreciate you letting me come on and talk about it. It's been really, really fun, and I appreciate it.
No, of course. Thank you for reaching out. Thanks for getting in touch, and it's always good to meet new people.
Yeah, absolutely.
My name is Sean Fallon. This has been From First to Last. Goodbye.